So the question I have is, why is it so hard for perimenopausal women and menopausal women to lose weight? And are we doing the wrong things with the right intentions? Well, my guest today is not only an expert in this area, he is one of the most well-cited, researched PhDs on the subject of nutrition that exists. So my guest today is Dr. Paul Arciero. He's the author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, the PRISE Life book. And that is based on his peer-reviewed scientific research. And his earliest research was done on perimenopausal and menopausal women. So I've known Paul for over 15 years. His research has been featured in Nature Communications, the Obesity Journal, the Journal of Applied Physiology, the American Journal of Preventative Medicine, BBC World News, BBC Reels, WebMD, Fortune, The Today Show, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, Time, American Heart Association, and so much more. And in this episode, we are going to talk about his research. We're going to talk about things that women who are in perimenopause and menopause, even postmenopausal, can do right now. And what he recommends is so accessible. It's common sense, but it is also proven. And guess what? You can start today just opening your fridge. Well, depending on what you have in your fridge, or ordering groceries or whatever you need to do. But it is so just ground truth. And that's what gets me excited. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with this episode of the Menopause Health Podcast with my guest, Dr. Paul Arciero.
Welcome to the Menopause Health Podcast, your go-to resource for practical advice brought to you by credentialed health professionals and industry experts. Here is your host, Susan Sly.
Well, Paul, welcome to the Menopause Health Podcast. And it's so great to see you. And I know we get to see each other all the time. I'm so excited that I feel like the world gets to sort of have a sneak peek into the conversations that we have over coffee or a protein shake. And Paul, so many people look at menopause as something that just affects women, but here you are as a researcher, as an entrepreneur, as a scientist. And one of the things I always say is menopause affects all of us. And can you think of it, whether it's a subject that has gone through one of your studies or a family member, can you think of a menopause story of someone who's been deeply impacted with their health, whether mental or physical, with menopause?
Oh, Susan, first of all, thanks for having me. This is such a treat to be able to share this with everyone with you. Like everyone, I'm sure we have so many of these stories with someone with who's been through menopause or who has gone through it. I have a couple that I could share, but one that really rings true for me the loudest. So my wife, who is currently hot. And I mean that, physically she is, but and attractive wise, but she has hot flashes. And she's been battling those for, a number of years. But let me back up. As she was evolving into menopause, when she was perimenopausal, I remember she went for a doctor checkup, and she left the office and came home, and I could tell she was very distraught. And so I said, well, how did things go? And she said, I don't know what to make of this. And she's someone who's been fit, active. We have a family dynamic that keeps us on the go. And she said, I was just diagnosed with fatty liver disease. And I could tell the look was one of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. I thought that was only for, men and women that are alcoholics or who have really severe disease, and that really rung a very strong tone in our lives at that time. I just remember it was a really challenging time. So she said, I remember you do something for people that helps them. She was kind of kidding. And she, truth be told, had gained a little bit of weight that she hadn't really noticed. And again, another challenge that confronts women as they enter into menopause. And so part of the visit was also, revealing this unfortunate news of fatty liver, but then also she had some excess weight that she was struggling with. And so, yeah, it was a tough time, but I just remember her coming home and saying, all right, I need to get serious. I need to really jump on all in on this, protein pacing thing that apparently you know something about. And so here's what makes the story such a happy ending, because it started off rough for her and me, that she had that diagnosis. And it was, I wouldn't say severe fatty liver disease, but it was definitely advanced. So from the time that she was diagnosed to 3 months later, she went back in for her checkup to her gastro. And Susan, I can say with 100% sincerity and confidence and joy that when she returned back, not having had any other intervention, lifestyle intervention, medical intervention of any type, no drug medication, pharmaceutical intervention, by following this lifestyle that she had been living. But life gets in the way, as we all know it does, and especially for women who are in the throes of peri and menopause. She had just lost a little bit of focus. But in 3 months of her diving in and making that commitment at 54 years old at the time, she came out on the other side completely absence of any fatty liver disease markers. And the doctor was blown away. He was surprised when he thought, yeah, she's gonna be struggling with this for a long time. So I guess I'm just using that story and reliving it in some ways, as distraught as we both were at the time, to provide hope that there is at the other side a life well lived and deserved and worthy by following some of these lifestyle strategies. So yeah, that's my story on menopause.
Oh, what a beautiful story, and what a tough thing to go through too, because share with everyone how long you've been married.
So we just hit 34 years.
Wow.
This past May. Yeah, that was a big achievement.
So it's significant, and thinking about, here's your love, your best friend, mother, grandmother now, but not then. And to see her go through this and to have a wake up call. One of the things I've heard time and again, Paul, is that we are going to pay for our health at some point. So we can either pay for it proactively, which costs less money, or we can pay for it reactively, which always costs more. And how great it was that it was early enough to be able to be, somewhat proactive, even though there was a reactive piece. I want to dive in, and you mentioned about the hot piece. So we joke on the show. So the room has to be 67. That is my upper temperature. I would rather have it at 65 or even better. When we're at our Montana house, I'm like, it's winter, I'm opening the windows. I don't care. When I had clients, when I was a practicing nutritionist in the 90s, when I had clients who would be this age and having hot flashes, I would empathize, but I couldn't get it. Now I get these, I call them surges of heat, and it's unreal.
Yes. We're in the car just every day now because we have one car, because we moved back, as you know, from Pittsburgh back to upstate New York. And we literally, this is no lie, we drive in the car and both air conditioners are, wherever they are, pointed, directly at my wife, or her windows open and I have the heat on, whatever it might be, to keep her cool. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll say to Chris, it's like, oh, it's not that I don't love you, babe, but there's no snuggling. There's no snuggling. It's too hot. Nope, not gonna do it. Last night I was holding his hand. So we talk about everything on the show. So I was holding his hand. I'm like, I love you, but this is about as good as it's gonna get. Like, I'm just really hot right now.
Susan, yes. It's a real, and as you said, who is not affected by it? I know when my own mother had forced menopause with a complete hysterectomy back in, 1970. It was the mid to late 1970s. I know. And just watching her as she's progressed. Yeah, something has to be improved for sure.
Definitely. And the research is showing too, as you know, just for our listeners, that it's almost like every week there's a new study that shows the earlier a woman goes into perimenopause symptoms, that the increased risk for cancer, dementia, and it's quite prolific. And it really leads me to wonder, and this is why we're so focused on this, is if we could improve lifestyle earlier on, have an earlier intervention, would that technically offset a lot of the symptoms women are experiencing, right? So that this is, it's a hypothesis and we don't know the answer to that because lifestyle makes a big part of it. And speaking of lifestyle, so I want to take everyone back to our origin story. So when Paul and I first met, I was reading his research and I was absolutely awestruck. And here's why. His research was done on perimenopausal and menopausal women. I think our first conversation we ever had, I said, why did you choose a group that's so tough? Like a lot of studies that are done, many of the people running the studies will choose a group that's easier just to get that, those better results and to be able to have something very exciting to show. But no, you're like, I'm going to work with the toughest group. So why is it so hard for women in perimenopause, late perimenopause and menopause to lose weight? What's going on in their bodies?
Oh, everything just now that you said was so spot on and really well said beautifully. Susan, here's the thing. As I was going through graduate training back in the mid 80s, into the late 80s, early 90s, it felt like to me, every study I read was on young, healthy men. And I just thought, wow, what about everyone else? What about, the forgottens? And clearly, this group was, without question, the forgottens. This group of women in our population, especially in this transition period, that they carry so much responsibility. I mean, lifestyle, personal, social, professional responsibility. And here they are managing all of these things on top of having to go through this massive lifestyle transition. To me, it was like a no-brainer. I mean, literally, it was like an no-brainer. I mean, what in the world? How could we not have been doing more scientific investigation and research on this group that is in the throes of one of the hardest lifestyle transitions of all? So yeah, it was an easy choice for me. And so when I started really diving into these human clinical trial intervention studies, I knew that this was the group I was going to work with. So I remember you asking me that, and I don't know if I stated it as clearly to you just now as I did back then, but I hope I did. Yeah, I think we're so late behind the eight ball, but we're making significant advances, and I'm hoping my research has made a significant impact on improving the life. But yeah, for me, having powerful, very instrumental, valuable women in my life, it was an easy decision to make that. And so yeah, that's been my career path, is to better identify and clearly create through scientific, human clinical trials, scientific research investigations, what are those lifestyle strategies that consistently rise to the top to allow women to live healthier, to live better, to thrive.
And the thing I love is, and we're going to get to what the women did, but first I want to talk about outcomes, because it's the word I want everyone to think about is accessible. So when I first looked at the outcomes, it was mind blowing, because even though we're talking about stubborn fat loss, we're going to differentiate between adipose tissue, visceral fat, and so forth. But when I looked at the other outcomes, endurance, strength, stamina, I was going, oh my goodness. And sometimes we overlook what is so simple, so accessible right in front of us. And so let's talk about the outcomes of the studies. And then we're going to talk about where those studies ended up getting published. But let's start with Paul. Could you explain to the lay people listening the difference between visceral fat and standard adipose fat, because adipose tissue, because they won't, not everyone's going to know.
Wow, Susan, timing is everything. And this is scary because I just opened it up because I wanted to have it in front of me. So I get invitations from journalists from all over the world daily. But one just came into my inbox in my email. He writes for Medscape, which is kind of the leading physician data information content center. And I do one almost a week for Medscape, which is great. So, it's nice to be in that position that I can do this. But he just sent me one. I'm going to just read the title because it'll specifically address the question of what you're asking. Years of endurance exercise training remodel abdominal subcutaneous adipose tissue, that's white adipose tissue, in adults with overweight or obesity. I don't know, I haven't read the study, but he wants me to provide these comments tonight because it's going to press his article soon, so I'll save that for another time. The question that you asked is, what is the difference? So what the difference is our white adipose tissue is located in easily accessible places in our body. It's located, for example, in this study, states it subcutaneously. That's a fancy word for under our skin. Mm-hmm. So white adipose tissue is located under our skin. We also accumulate it, men and women differently, by the way. Women more so in the hips and thighs, men more so in the abdominal region, along with the visceral fat. But we have it, the saddlebags, the spare tire, locations that most people carry it. But just generally, most people are going to store the white adipose tissue, subcutaneous fat, underneath the skin, generally located all over the body. But in some cases, as I just described, men and women will deposit it in different places. The visceral fat is that fat that is sort of ectopic. It's not supposed to be there. It's located in an area that is dangerous because it's around our vital organs, our liver, our pancreas, our heart. It's located in locations that we don't want to have it impeding the healthy function of those organs. And so it's predominantly around the middle section of our waist area and above up to the heart. So it's dangerous because it's more sticky in our body, meaning it's less accessible. So as you were talking about, the paradigms of lifestyle that I've created are highly accessible, easy to incorporate into a daily lifestyle regimen. When it comes to adipose tissue, white adipose tissue subcutaneous is easily accessible. We can tap into it and burn it and kind of, use it as an energy source very quickly, exhale it off as CO2, whereas visceral fat is a little more sticky. And so when I started this 38 years ago doing this research, I was determined to not only impact the white adipose tissue because that was relatively easy, but I wanted to literally target with my lifestyle interventions. And I think this is the real, bullseye of our conversation here today. How is it that I can target that very stubborn, sticky, kind of unrelenting visceral fat that accumulates, that's so difficult to use and get rid of?
Yeah. And that, again, you're not ever a person I know to shy away from hard, right? Because when people look at, say, a commercial that might be on television for, say, a weight loss aid, they'll say, oh, participants lost, 9.8 pounds more than, using our whatever, but we don't know where those pounds have necessarily come from. Right. And one of the things I want everyone to understand as well is as we age, our metabolism goes down. So after the age of 25, we're losing about a quarter pound to half a pound of muscle per year, which will tee up the next question. And that's why it's so important for women as they go into perimenopause and menopause to do more resistance training. And for women who are, say, cardio addicts, I would be one of the things I had to learn. is, hey, yes, it's great to go out and run for an hour and then do a hot yoga later on in the afternoon, but that isn't necessarily going to make you leaner, because you're still wasting all the muscle, right? Without adequate protein intake, without the resistance training. So, Paul, I want to jump in. Could you share sort of I guess, the summary of the results, and we'll get into the how, because I want everyone listening, especially women in perimenopause and menopause, and those of you who love us, to really hear these results, because unlike anything else that has really been researched, the results are so comprehensive, impacting gaining muscle, losing fat, endurance, strength, and so forth. So, Paul, go for it.
Yeah, this is the fun part. As we just talked about, a lot of research shows that weight can be changed and reduced through lots of different means. I tell people all the time, you can diet on literally, there's no debate about this, on anything, whether it's Coke, whether it's Dunkin' Donuts, whether it's any other unhealthy food. You can diet on those foods and lose weight, but that's not where health is achieved. That's not where health begins to thrive. And so what we focus on are lifestyle paradigms that don't focus on weight, but instead focus on the change in body composition. And when I say that to people, most of the time they think it's related to a reduction in body fat. And while fat reduction and fat changes are important, what's even more important is this maintenance of your, or increase in your metabolically active lean body mass, your fat-free mass, as we also call it. So that would be things like your muscle. It would also be your vital organs. It would be your brain. It would be all those things that are so important for our optimal health. So what we have found over now, over 4 decades, or close to 4 decades in our laboratory research studies, is that when these women follow this paradigm that we'll get into the mechanics of here shortly, it results in significant proportional increase in their lean body mass. In some cases, Susan, in as short as 4 to 8 to 12 weeks. So somewhere in that 4 to 8 to 12 weeks, but definitely by 4 weeks, without question by 8, and the floodgates are opened up by 12 weeks. They can have anywhere from 6 to a 9% increase in their proportion of their lean body mass. That's almost unheard of. At the same time, we have a minimum of a 33% reduction of their visceral fat. Now, I say that word, and I don't know how much it resonates with people. Our visceral fat, when we quantify it through the sophisticated laboratory techniques that we use, it's called an IDEXA. We get to quantify to the gram, actually. I mean, to the gram. So if you know what a gram is, it's pretty small. But we can quantify changes in the visceral fat and the other body composition compartments to the gram. And we see in some cases in these women following without exercise, and that's the other thing that we didn't really talk about. In some of our interventions, we put a lockdown on them exercising, because we want to be able to fully and 100% account for a change in their nutritional quality as resulting in these findings. And so, yeah, we see changes in the kilograms of reduction of their visceral fat, which is just, it's incredible. A third less loss of their visceral fat compared to some of the other leading diets that are out there, or nutrition plans, if you want to call them that. So those are just two, I think, are the most notable, because we know that when we can favorably induce a change of our lean body mass in terms of either maintaining it as we lose our total body weight, or increase the relative proportion of it and drop our visceral fat, health improves drastically. And when I say health, I mean our metabolic health. Our risk for diabetes plummets. Our risk for cardiovascular heart disease plummets. Our risk for neurodegenerative decline plummets. Our risk for inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions plummets. And our risk for musculoskeletal, which is loss of bone mineral density, loss of muscle mass, or osteoarthritic type conditions plummets. So yeah, those two changes alone, we could talk a whole show on, but I thought I'd start with those two because those are the most notable.
And when I think about it, there's really and truly releasing the visceral fat, as we discussed, is not easy,
It
right?
is not.
And that it is the most toxic fat. It is the most dangerous fat. So when you see someone who would say that they're skinny fat, or sometimes someone who looks overall lean and healthy, but they might have a lot of visceral fat around the organs, literally choking out the organs. And most people don't measure for that. There's not a differentiator. And the research as well, too, when I remember seeing videos coming out of your lab, and these women are squatting and they're sprinting. Could you just talk briefly about the increase in their physical performance too? Because so many women, and I'm just going to lay it right out, they look at this time as an ending, not a beginning. And I have been really committed to following what your research has illustrated to be effective. I ran my fastest 10K in May that I had run since I was in my 30s. And so, right, like as this show is coming out, I'm 52. So even faster than I had in almost 15 years, Paul. I'm leaner. People are like, wow, you're so lean, but we'll get into what I'm doing. And again, it's accessible. It is, but the reality is, you said it, women are so busy. They're overwhelmed at times. They have a lot of things going on. And one of our shared goals is to make it so seamless that women don't have to think about it, but it really does require a paradigm shift, right? So could you just quickly talk about the strength and endurance gains? Because that really excited me, to be candid.
No, these are great points. And listen, for the audience listening and watching, if you haven't seen Susan's calf muscles, you know that she walks the walk. I mean, you've got some calf muscles that are the envy of many, men included. So yeah, there's no doubt it's making it accessible, making it easily, making it quality. That's the key word here, Susan, because I think we get so overwhelmed, we get so misguided, so misinformed that health is all about the quantity of what we do, whether it's reducing the quantity of food that we eat and increasing the quantity of exercise that we do, and that's missing the bullseye of achieving optimal health, and especially for these women that are struggling at this time in this phase of life. And so, yes, something has to be done. I'm so thrilled that we have this available to them. So the changes that take place in their fitness is amazing. It's astounding. I mean, as impressive as those results are that I just gave you, the 6 to 9% increase in their lean body mass, a 33% reduction in their visceral fat occurring without exercise. Now add the exercise on, you can imagine the windfall of benefit that's occurring. And so what we've created in our paradigm, our lifestyle paradigm, is this very, very highly hyper focused quality of experience of movement. So it comprises of, first, it's called PRISE, by the way, that's the acronym, PRISE. The P is the protein pacing. The R is the resistance training, as you just alluded to, that there is definitely a need for the messaging to get out to women, especially in peri and menopause, to make sure that they are doing some level of resistance, not bulking muscle resistance exercise, but functional resistance movement exercise. And the videos that you're describing, I love. I mean, I go back and watch those just to get myself inspired on days that I need it. But yeah, it's amazing the light bulb that goes off, the energy, the spark that's lit in these women when they begin to introduce this form, because so many of them are just encouraged to get out and move and do some walking, like you said, mostly aerobic cardiovascular exercise. But the real sweet spot of benefit comes from engaging in some of that resistance exercise, and it has to be the right type and at the right time. So that's really important. And then engaging in some high intensity interval type exercise, that's absolutely critical. And then the stretching, as you alluded to, the yoga, the Pilates, the Tai Chi, something that's enhancing flexibility and mobility with a small strength component, and then the endurance aerobic cardiovascular one. So those are the four main types of human movement that we encourage in our lifestyle paradigm. And they're proven, Susan, to be so highly effective. And just one little quick story. We've had women that have come in that have, committed and devoted themselves to the aerobic cardiovascular lifestyle. And they've come into my research studies frustrated and disgruntled and a little bit, pissed off that they've been encouraged to pursue that lifestyle of aerobic cardiovascular exercise, but then still experiencing this weight gain and this lethargy of energy. They come into our studies and we completely flip it upside down. We say we want you to do the aerobic cardiovascular exercise much less in terms of relative amount, or at least in priority, and emphasize some of these other forms of movement. And when they come in a week or two later, very reluctant at first, by the way, with a new hop in their step, a sparkle in their eye, just literally thriving with energy. It's such a beautiful thing to see. And when that becomes congruent with their physical body compositional changes and their inner hormonal changes, it's amazing. So yeah, that's what excites me. I could talk about it all day, but for me, to bring that revelation, it really is. It's a revelation to these women in their thinking, and once they embrace it, the sky is the limit, and the results speak for themselves.
Well, and we're going to go a little bit deeper on part of this, because you were published in Nature Communications, it's so significant. I was beside myself for you as my friend. I felt like I had been published in Nature. I was so excited for you. And I want to jump into this concept of protein pacing, because many women in this age group are not getting enough protein. And they are, to your point, they might be doing a lot of cardio, and they're still eating maybe not what they think is a lot of carbohydrate, but the carbohydrate to protein ratio, the carbs are way too high. And that a simple shift in really making sure you're getting protein at regular intervals. This is one of the tenets of this. And I'll just do a funny thing. So right now, if people are looking at a video snippet of this, I've got a homemade protein ball on my desk, and I put protein powder in it. And then there's a company called Creation Nation. They were on Shark Tank. Yep. And she created these mixes. So I just mixed the protein powder in, some melted organic coconut oil, some organic almond milk, and I make them and I put them in the fridge, because I'm so committed to protein pacing. I travel with protein balls, I travel with my shakes. But let's jump in. How does it work? So someone listening, if they're like, oh my gosh, I want to do this, what do I do?
Yeah, great. Oh, I love that. You made me my mouth water just now looking at that. So here's how it works. It's actually quite simple. You want to first and foremost consume the highest quality protein that you can obtain. And fortunately, there's some really good sources out there: grass-fed, wild-caught, pasture-raised. Those, and full fat, by the way. I don't know if all of you have been keeping up with the latest research, but all the latest research now is showing more full fat is better, especially if it's grass-fed, pasture-raised. Eggs, beef, chicken, pork, fish, dairy, Greek yogurt, things like that, and even plant-based. And so we want to make sure that we have a very healthy balance of some of these very, very high nutrient-dense plant-based versions. I'm also, Susan, a big proponent of supplements, either meal replacements or other forms of help that we need, because it's hard to be a real sleuth, as you just described, when you're traveling, when you've got lots of things that you're balancing every single day, with picking people up, dropping them off, getting to places that you need to be. So I believe it's actually mandatory that we need to have some readily available and kind of non-perishable forms of meal replacement powders and bars and things like that, of the highest quality, again, from grass-fed, pasture-raised, whatever it might be, undenatured as much as possible. That just simply means that it hasn't been processed really highly. And so if you can get a undenatured, grass-fed version of, for example, a whey protein, that's the highest quality protein that our bodies can assimilate, meaning absorb and then effectively use inside of our cells. So that's priority number one. And usually bookending it at the beginning of the day and the end of the day is paramount. So I try to encourage as much as possible. And again, in all of the women that have been in my research, and it's now in the thousands over the last 38 years, the ones that have had the greatest success are the ones that have adhered to the protein pacing as close as possible. And that means the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning, they obtain and consume the highest quality protein they can. For some of them, it's a smoothies. For some of them, they incorporate some of these things into more typical meals that you would eat. And then at the end of the day, that's a mandatory requirement that you bookend your day on either end with a protein the highest quality protein you can consume, and then evenly spaced throughout the day. I know you've had some really good success doing a 2 to 3 hour, depending upon your schedule. We generally try to keep to a 4 hour for most people is what we use. But again, varying it here or there, whatever works for your schedule and for you is what's important. But it should be in a timed interval fashion, because that's what the body will become accustomed to and will begin to assimilate and then utilize and manifest in terms of your health.
Well, and I love that you said the flexibility, right? So I do 2 to 3 hours, and the research showed 4. I was, a full disclaimer for people who don't know, I many years ago was a professional triathlete, a long distance triathlete. So I am accustomed from my training days to eating every 2 to 3 hours. So I'm not going to resist it and starve myself. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting in a minute. But so, for me, I'm having, to what you said, Paul, I'm having a grass-fed whey-based shake. I'm mixing it with organic unsweetened almond milk because I just want like that thicker shake. I travel so much. And one of the things I do is I'll put a scoop of my protein powder in a shaker cup as soon as I get in the hotel room. And sometimes I land like you and I've got to go to a function. I grab a bottle of water, I put it in my shake. I drink that down. I'm never going to go to a cocktail party, a dinner, and just eat, 1,500 calories in a sitting, because I will always put a shake in. So, and some days I work out more than one time, right? So the second workout might be a walk, or it might be a yoga class or something. But so that's what I do, but they're not big meals. I don't do well with like, I'm going to sit down and have a steak in the middle of the day or something like that. But the size of the meals when people are eating, how many protein grams should they be looking for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of that depends on your gender, your age, your activity level, as you just described, a number of different factors. There's about 6. So I've created these algorithms that have 6 or so of these factors that we account for. And we're always improving and revising it. But generally speaking, it depends on when your wake up time is, when your sleep time. So the grams will range somewhere between, and again, this is predominantly for an 18-year-old up to a 108-year-old or 118-year-old. It's going to range somewhere between 30 and 50 grams. And Susan, you just made me think of something really important. As we age, many times people have the thought process that we need to reduce our protein intake. It's too much stress on our kidneys. And just the opposite. The scientific literature shows very, very convincingly, as we age, our bodies lose its ability to utilize and incorporate those amino acids from the proteins that we consume. So we're at about a 20, and this starts at the age of 40, by the way. Many people think, as we age, it's 50, 60, 70. No, by the time we get to 40 years old, our body is losing its ability to extract from the protein the amino acids into the cells of our body. So we know that when you turn 40, and in some cases it's even earlier, you need to start to increase the amount of protein, or at least the availability of the amino acids within the protein. And that's why there are some versions that are better than others. You described the undernatured whey, grass-fed whey protein. That's the highest bioavailability. So beginning to incorporate greater amounts of protein as we age, accounting for our sex, our activity level, and things of that nature is really important. But I tell people it's a ballpark of around 30 to 50, and it can range from 0.7 to 1 to 1.1 at the most pound of body weight. So again, that's the general range, 0.7 to 1.1 grams per pound of body weight.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when I was training athletes, one of the going back to OG research, Tudor Bomba at University of Toronto, this is like from the 90s, which Paul will remember. And we were doing a lot of periodization of strength training and stuff like that. Yeah. Listeners may be wondering, so how much do you go for every day? So every day I aim for about 120 grams. Now, if I'm putting in a longer training day, then I might go for a little bit more, which would hit the 1 gram per pound. But and it's not always easy to get that 120. That's why I have to I make my protein balls up, and I travel with my shakes and bars. And even in that research, I remember, Paul, like these women, if they were hungry at night, they would have a protein bar. So I also travel with my protein bars. Some night I'm in the hotel room, come back from a dinner, and I will eat a protein bar, sit in bed, watch Netflix, like absolutely, right? Like to get it all in very quickly. Intermittent fasting. So there has been a lot of perspectives and voices about intermittent fasting. And in fact, there was a book even written, Fast Like a Girl, talking about how women in menses and menopause needed to fast differently. A lot of people jumped on the keto bandwagon. A lot of people jumped on the fasting bandwagon. And some people were like, oh, there's only a 4-hour window. Sometimes there's an 8-hour window, or you need to fast, and let's talk specifically about your research in this age range for perimenopausal and menopausal women. Super quick. What are the recommendations for intermittent fasting for them from your research that's had the most effect, the best effect?
No, great question. Yeah, the time-restricted eating is clearly kind of catapulted to the top. The research still shows that it's not the best. It can be an effective method transiently, short term, for people to lose some weight, lose some body fat. It's not ideal for our lean body mass. That would be the 16-8 or the 18-6, or some, as you described, the 24, where they don't eat for 16, 18, or 20 hours and then eat within an 8, 6, or 4-hour window. So that's not ideal for our lean body mass, Susan. So I don't recommend that, and the science doesn't support it. What we use is a nutritional fast. So we don't recommend. Let me just take a step back. When we talk about and explain and define fasting, some fasts are completely fasting. It's just water. Some allow certain things, grapefruits and other things, soups and things like that. So there's different variations of fasting. We use a nutritionally supported fast. That's been the most effective. And the reason is because you're undergoing some cellular processes that require some additional help. And I always use the analogy that if you were to do a deep clean of your house, would you just use water? Well, no one would. I mean, water's not effective enough. So there's, grime and dirt and some debris that really needs to be, scrubbed out. But you wouldn't use really harsh chemicals either, because those harsh chemicals can degrade the lining of your carpet or your floor or your counter or your dish or your appliance. So when we use a nutritionally supported fast, we're using phytochemicals from plants that are proven to be extremely beneficial for the body. They're either adaptogenic, which means they help the body adapt to stress. Those are highly effective, or they're antioxidants. Those are what help sequel and reduce free radical damage. All of these things are occurring during the fast, or at least following a normal day's worth of activity and exercise and eating. So we do fasts ranging in time from anywhere between 24 to 60 hours. And we give flexibility. Again, I like that word that you used earlier, because not everyone can do the same amount of time. But we do know that at 18 hours of a nutritional fast, the body begins to transition into that state of autophagy. And that's critical. And so we follow that paradigm of our nutritional fast that includes the antioxidants and the adaptogens while you're fasting. And so for these menopausal women, That's been, again, the golden ticket, using that reference again, because when we place them on that 24 to 60 hour, and the 24 would be the shorter end, we usually try to get them to a 36 because we have them extend it overnight. But again, they're not devoid or absent of any form of nourishment. We're providing every 4 hours in the same protein pacing interval time period, really high quality nourishment for them to help augment and facilitate the process of autophagy. And I didn't define what autophagy is. It's vacuuming your body. So you're vacuuming all the old debris, unwanted waste products that you no longer should have in your body. And so when we undergo a nutritional fast at that 18-hour time point, especially when you're providing antioxidants and adaptogens to help with the cleaning process, you're doing the highest level clean of your body that you can do. And so we allow people to do somewhere in between that time period. And that has resulted in just, incredible. I mean, good enough for Nature Communications. So we're doing something right.
Well, and we will include the Nature Communications link in the show notes, because the impact on gut health, we didn't even go into that. And I love, I'm writing notes, the nutritionally supported fast, right? And so even as you know, Paul, for myself, living on airplanes, so what I will do is I will use that as a fasting day. So, and then because sometimes I'm in transit, for 8 hours or more if I have to take a connector. So I've slept overnight, that is included in my 18 hours. And then I get to the hotel and I'll break that fast, have my shake. And so there are ways to do this to be flexible. And I think that's the big thing. Women in this cohort have enough stress, anxiety, brain fog, fatigue. It doesn't have to be something onerous. And like you said, the PRISE method does make it simple. And like any lifestyle, it'll take you a few weeks to adapt, but you can begin to see results very quickly. You were going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, because you've done so well with everything. It doesn't have to be weekly. It doesn't have to be every 2 weeks. The great thing about the human body is that it has memory, the cells, and the autophagy and mitophagy, which is also the turning over of mitochondria that is so important. Those all have memory to them. And so I always give the women the understanding and the comfort of knowing that they don't have to be regimented with this and they have to do it every week. That once they kind of get to their point where they're comfortable and satisfied from a body composition standpoint, a health standpoint, an energy standpoint, I only do those nutritionally supported fasts once every, depending upon my exercise schedule, once every 2 months, sometimes 3 months. So I just want people to know that there's flexibility and there's individualization and customization to it depending upon where you're at. So I think that's really important.
Well, and Paul, I mean, we could talk so much more, right? We'll have to do a part 2 of this. I think the exciting thing is from a perspective of where this is going. And I know you and I are both very passionate about artificial intelligence and technology, and being able to offer this in a way that is precise for women based on their schedule, their activity, all sorts of things. And I can't thank you enough for the research that you do, because it has changed my life. Honestly, like we haven't solved hot flashes yet, but let's see what we can do.
Well, we're gonna solve that.
We are going to get there, and in the meantime, even if we're having hot flashes, to the girls who are listening, we look really hot. So it's one thing to have a hot flash and not look hot, but you might as well look hot while you have your hot flash. So Paul, thank you again so much for being on the show. Again, everything Paul and I are talking about, they will be in the show notes. Check out the link. And please share this episode, share the season 1 of the Menopause Health Podcast with everyone you know and care about. And again, Paul, thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Susan.
This Menopause Health Podcast is brought to you by the Pause Technologies. To find out more, visit thepause.ai and follow us on your favorite social media channels. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share the show, and connect with us. We will see you in the next episode.